Some traits are controlled by the action of more than one gene, like eye color in humans or the coat colors of Labrador dogs. When we're discussing gene interactions, it's important to note that many traits, are regulated by more than one gene. And these traits are known as polygenic genes. So things like skin color, eye color, height are all controlled for by more than one gene. So if we look at this graph, we can see that instead of this being a dihybrid cross of two different traits, this is a dihybrid cross of two genes that control for the length of ears of corn. And we see a typical bell curve where we have more of them in the medium ratio, same as we would have lots of kind of heterozygotes in a dihybrid cross, and very few homozygous recessive and homozygous dominant. So this is when more than one gene code for a single trait. There's also polygenic characteristics that are epistatic. So the action of one gene masks the expression of another gene. So we can have dog coats that are black or brown, but we have a dominant trait that prevents pigment from forming and a recessive trait that doesn't prevent pigment from forming. So W is an epistatic gene because it interferes with the ability of the dog coat color, black or brown, to be expressed. So if you even have two dominant black alleles, but two recessive alleles or two dominant alleles that prevent pigment from forming, you will not have a black dog. So another example is at least two pairs of genes control eye color. We have brown and blue, and then pigment or no pigment. And so you can have two brown alleles and then two no pigment alleles, and no pigment will be forming. But if you have one brown allele and two blue alleles and pigment alleles, you'll have blue eyes. So gene pair A is epistatic to B, dominant, and B blue because it produces no pigmented eyes. So the A allele controls the appearance of the B allele. And epigenetics is where the environment affects gene expression. So there are some genes that are affected by our environment. One case is like stress genes in mice. So if a mother mouse or rat is very caring mouse or rat mother and she licks her babies often, their genes for stress are turned off. But if she's a mother rat that doesn't take care of her little rat babies and doesn't lick them to keep them calm, they tend to be rats that will run around really often and in a lab situation press the button for food all the time even though no food's coming because their genes for stress were turned on by the lack of licking. In humans, there is another dominant allele that causes vitiligo, which is small unpigmented spots that appear on the body. And there's also a recessive allele that causes albinism, which causes the entire body to go unpigmented. But vitiligo cannot be seen in albinos because the albino genes prevent any pigment from forming in the first place. So we're going to look quickly at the dog coat example and given the possible genotypes and phenotypes of the possible dog offspring. So the first dog can have the genotype or in his gametes of BA or B lowercase a. And the next dog could have dominant for black and then no pigment and brown and again no pigment. Or sure, that's white. So we're going to go through and we have BA, lowercase BA, and BA. So going through, and again, I like to put the capital letters first. So we have a heterozygote. And so we're going to have, because A is for, let me just go back here. A is for, let's go, capital A is for no pigment. So these two dogs are going to be white. So we're going to have 2 white, 1 black, and 1 brown dog in this example. So we can also have genes that have a complementary interaction. So this produces a phenotype that cannot be produced by itself. So in chicken combs, we have a rose comb, a pea comb, which is located on a different chromosome. If you have both the dominant R and dominant P alleles, you'll have a walnut comb. And the absence of a dominant R and P gives a single comb. And this is different from intermediate inheritance because these genes are located on different chromosomes, where the rose and P are located on different ones. They're not the same alleles, they're actually different genes, but they're complementary. So if we look at this, we can have our walnut in the top right with 1 dominant rose and 1 dominant P. And then we would have the single comb in our top left with 2 recessive rose combs alleles and 2 recessive P alleles. Then we would have rose and P in the middle. So enzymes are protein molecules that speed up chemical reactions in cells. And these are also coded for by genes. So in a clover plant, the production of cyanide is regulated by 2 genes. Capital G, which provides in production of the enzyme. Lowercase g, that enzyme is not produced. Capital H provides production for enzyme 2. And lowercase h is a mutation, so the enzyme is not produced. So a plant that is dominant in both traits will produce cyanide, but a plant that is recessive in one trait or the other trait will not. And we just have the heterozygous there as an example. So if a plant is capital G, capital G, capital H, it will produce cyanide, as long as it's not homozygous recessive for one of the traits. When we look at pleiotropic genes, this affects more than one trait. So the mutated gene causing sickle cell anemia still allows it to carry oxygen, but when it gives oxygen to the body, the molecules become interlocked and it changes the shape of the red blood cells. So there's normal hemoglobin and then the mutated hemoglobin. And these red blood cells do not pass through the capillaries well, oxygen is not delivered normally, and normal oxygen function is impaired. In addition to the red blood cell shape, sickle cell anemia have other symptoms like enlarged spleens, rheumatism, pneumonia, and heart, kidney, lung, and muscle damage due to their condition. In Marfan syndrome, you have the inability to produce normal connective tissue due to one gene. And the symptoms include symptoms of the eye, skeleton, and cardiovascular defects. So they have incredibly large hands and long limbs. I also want to talk a little bit about breeding patterns in animals. So breeding patterns in animals and plants can be completely controlled by humans, and this would be known as artificial selection or selective breeding. And so we cross animals with desired traits to produce offspring with those characteristics. And we might want offspring with 2 characteristics. So now that there's labradoodles, because poodles are hypoallergenic and Labradors are like smart, loving animals. They'll have golden doodles with golden retrievers and poodles. And this has been used by farmers and ranchers for years, as well as dog breeders. And this is to improve the domestic variety of plants and animals for human use. So we want canola that can germinate and grow quickly, where our summer season, our growing season is shorter. So purebreds is one of the locations that we do this, and the genotypes are regulated by inbreeding. So when we have homozygous traits, if we have purebreds for homozygous traits, by breeding only those animals to one another, we're maintaining those traits in that variety. And new varieties of plants and animals can be created through hybridization. So this is a picture of a zebra crossed with a horse, an attempt to blend desirable but different traits, like the labradoodle or golden doodle. I remember somebody had like a pointer poodle cross. We see this a lot in different dog breeding to get those more popular family dogs with hypoallergenic traits.